Well, another ward race that we weren't sure if we were going to profile here on the O Show was Ward 4. It's interesting because the incumbent Sam Marula is retiring. And we weren't sure if there was going to be sort of a heated race to replace Sam. But then we saw a video that came out and we were so impressed by it that even one of our producers overheard it and said, "Who's that? Who's that running?" We thought we need to talk to this woman because that kind of effort running for wards in Hamilton, I think, is so significant and impressive. So Tammy Hwang, welcome to the O Show.
Thank you, Laura. Thank you so much for having me. I've been a longtime watcher actually of the O Show, and I love all of the content that you've been pushing out. So I'm especially flattered and very, very humbled that you would consider talking to me today.
Well, that's super nice, and I did not know that at all. But I will say what caught me was your ease with which you told your story of why you were running in this election. But one of the things that really grabbed me, and we're doing this for Canada Day, Show broadcast, was you started by talking about the immigrant experience of your family coming from Taiwan and how that motivates you to be engaged in Ward 4. You chose that as your opening. Can you tell us why that was so important for you to put forward as sort of the first thing for people to understand about you?
I think the way that the makeup of Hamilton is changing very rapidly. And one of the things that really, really prompted me was to put my name forward and show that racialized people and people of color and women are eligible and interested in making a change in their community. So when I spoke about this, that immigrant experience was so powerful in my life because we were the ones that my parents moved here. My sister and I are born here, so we're born Canadian. But that immigrant experience is so indicative of a lot of our Hamiltonians and our community members. And what we need to do is we also need to highlight and showcase how we as immigrants can also be involved in our community and how we can make a change and be something. Part of that role was actually being in the community's convenience store, right? So that was a hub of activity for Ward 4. And I grew up talking to different Ward 4 community members, literally things like I could tell them the different candies that they were going to order or the different videos that they were going to rent. A lot of our community grew up with watching my sister and I behind the till and getting to know the rest of the community. And that was such a formative experience for myself that's what prompted me to really say, I want to do something for this community. And it's where I grew up. It's where my family lives. I love that community. It's part of where I volunteer. It's all of who I am.
Now, you had already been doing stuff for the community in your capacity working with economic development at the city. And I find that really interesting because if you've been watching the O Show, you know that we are very direct about our concerns about what is happening inside of City Hall culture. And so, just so I understand sort of where you are with this, presumably as counselor, do you feel as though that would give you a bit more insight or an added advantage? And if so, is there something that you think needs to change at City Hall? Do you see as being a counselor, a leader around that horseshoe in governance, that there are changes that need to be made? And if so, what would you do?
Agreed. And being a city staffer has quite literally been one of the best jobs of my life. I love waking up and saying to myself, I love going to work. So I want to get that very clear. I love working for economic development. And a big reason for that is because economic development and the city of Hamilton and city staffers, they work really hard to work for our community and try and find solutions for our community. Now, putting my name in to be a elected official at the city council, a big reason for that was I wanted to ensure that the projects that Sam Marilla had already put forward, but newer investments that are coming forward are also getting as much interest, as much resources, as much essentially building in sustainability that I know that I can do, and I can also pull upon a lot of the resources from my time at City Hall. So it was one of those things where as council is changing, but as the community is changing, how do I bring my skills and my expertise to something that's going to generate a lot more communication, transparency, and honesty? And as well, I want to look at it from a bit of a sustainability perspective. How do we not only look at piloting projects, but actually building in a sustainable financial model so that these projects can continue moving forward. So it's thinking about it from sort of all of these multifaceted perspectives, and as well pulling in the resources that I know are there that perhaps some of my colleagues may not know about, but that's just because I get the value and the benefit of working at City Hall.
Yeah, so it's interesting you say that you love the experience as a staff. Some staff over the years in cultural studies have not loved it so much. And I guess maybe that's department specific or who knows. But uh, also, though, you identify the need for honesty and transparency at council as a governance model. And I think that that's important because you are effectively in an old guards ward. Sam was certainly there for a long time, and represented part of the power structure that has been given its own nomenclature, because there was a certain way of operating with people who had been around that council table for a long time. And so what I'm hearing from you when you say you want to make sure that there is the consistency of projects coming to Ward 4, but that you want to look at how the city is changing. Can you give me sort of an example of where there might have been something in the pipeline with Sam, and sort of what your take will be on it, or how you'll augment or adjust that based on these changes that you cite?
So I think the one that's always top of mind is going to be LRT. LRT is one of those things that's traveling right through the middle of Ward 4. It is where we're going to be daylighting, so cracking open the roadways in order to ensure that we're putting in for that infrastructure. One of the areas that I've been really advocating for is the upgrade and the maintenance of our internet infrastructure. So when we talk about how we're changing, I mean, 2 year, it doesn't need to be said. We're going to online remote learning, we're working from home. The fact is, we have internet infrastructure that is available and could be upgraded that is under our streets. And sometimes those things need to get pushed to the forefront so we can start thinking about how do we not only maybe create net new, but maybe just maintain what's already down there. And sometimes with LRT, they're looking at really big things like electrical and waterways, but we may not be thinking about how are we future proofing for the city of Hamilton. So thinking about it from that perspective. A lot of what I did too was I was working for smart cities. I was working for in terms of internet infrastructure. So these are things that are very near and dear to my heart. And I care very much about making sure that we're building a future for our kids because they're going to be remote learning. They might be working from home, but ensuring that we have enough internet that can actually sustain us as we move forward.
I can tell that you're a City Hall economic development person because you use things like daylighting and future proofing. I'm learning a whole new vernacular talking to you. But so, Tammy, on that point, I look at internet infrastructure. Certainly, we've been doing the OShow from home since the pandemic, right? And I think to myself, it's also a matter of equity, isn't it?
Yes,
Because
absolutely.
haven't some kids been left behind because they simply couldn't
Absolutely.
just go back to home learning where their parents had two laptops and a desk and were sitting there working from home, right? They went home to
Agreed.
maybe empty houses and no internet.
Agreed. Agreed. And part of that is a lot of people have been talking about internet as being the fourth major utility. It's one that's right behind water, heat, and electricity. And how do we think about digital equity? But it's also making sure that we have enough of that resource so that you think about how would anybody in a vulnerable state access any of the resources that we have today? So let's say we need to pay a fine or we need to pay our property taxes. We're getting to a point where we're not even really considering going into City Hall anymore, and all of those are being delivered online. Now, if you didn't have access to a phone, internet access, how would you be able to do that? Or how would you be? So this is where I get really passionate about this because this is something that it is about equity and it is about ensuring that we create a future that is available to all.
And so let's talk about equity around housing, because obviously economic development, your expertise, but also what's going on in Ward 4 and the bigger city. I don't know if you've caught Cameron Kretsch's Ward 2 conversation, but he talked a lot about affordable housing and how to both leverage this opportunity with development and do soft density and really make sure that nobody's kind of left behind. So what are your values when it comes to things like affordable housing?
I think when it comes to affordable housing, Hamilton in Ward 4 is particularly interesting because there are a lot of actual single detached homes that are in Hamilton, in Ward 4. And some of those areas are in the North End and they are single detached, but the property sizes are a little bit smaller. But then we also have Ward 4 South part of Ward 4 where they have larger property lines and lots. And I think that there's an opportunity to look at secondary dwelling units. There's an opportunity for basement apartments and ensuring that we're helping our homeowners with figuring out how to navigate that process at City Hall. But it's also in Ward 4, what's really exciting is Indwell. And Indwell has already been doing a ton of work around affordable housing, and they've got such great revenue models to help sustain and offset the cost of some of those developments. Now, part of my role at economic development is also looking at it from how does this benefit the city, looking at it from a master plan perspective. And it's also thinking about what are some of the different mechanisms we can employ in order to facilitate more affordable housing. I don't know what that looks like currently, but that could be things like development charges. Maybe it's an increase or a decrease. Maybe it's looking at how do we help with our homeowners with site plans? How do we help streamline the process in order to encourage more affordable units to come onto the scene? It's also working with our developers and talking to them about how are they going to invest in our community. So I think that there are a variety of different mechanisms that we can potentially employ. It's really about ensuring that we're having that open communication both with our community and with some of our private sector partners and with the city to ensure that we're all on the same page and we're all moving towards an affordable housing solution together.
Now, I love Indwell. We had Jeff Nevin on before Christmas talking about the affordable housing crisis. And of course, they do wonderful work. I have to ask though, are there things that you think need to be done differently in terms of that conversation, that multi-sectoral solution-based conversation than have been done? Because we are in a crisis in some ways of our own making. And I thought Cameron made the case last week really well, or earlier this week when he talked about the fact that, this has been coming for 20 years, a lack of investment in affordable housing. I'm not sure if he mentioned it or just my own opinion around private sector solutioning instead of municipalities working really robustly with provincial federal government partners to solve the problem. In other words, we baked this cake,
Mhm, mhm, mhm.
so what would you do differently than what has been done? Because it sounds great what you're saying, more communication, more collaboration, but everyone's got vested interest. We just saw the province is boosting what landowners can charge in terms of rents in the middle of an affordable housing crisis. It doesn't seem like everybody's on the same page.
Agreed. And you know what? That is a really tough question. And I'm going to be honest with you. I don't know what I would do differently currently. But at the end of the day, I would love to lean on my other ward counselors like Cameron, who has been at that front line speaking about affordable housing and learning from him a little bit. And at the end of the day, I also believe that council needs to not just think about their wards, but think about Hamilton as a whole. And affordable housing is not something that is just ward specific. It is something that affects us all. So I want to say that that's just me being honest and transparent. I don't have that answer, but I am excited about what we can do together.
I super love that answer. I got to tell you, Tammy, as a journalist for many years prior to stop being a journalist, but as an interviewer, many times I've wished that the person just admitted that. Like, I don't know, but I'm open minded to learn. And you even have that on your website. You actually use the words I'm open minded to collaborative solutions. And you have, of course, Narinder, who's your neighboring ward councillor incumbent. If she gets reelected, she had some powerful statements about the province's new landlord rates as well yesterday. So I'm sure you'll have a lot of opinions around that council table. Let me shift to something that you said on your platform. And I know Canada Day, you're having an event, you're going to meet people and get more into all this stuff. But one of the things you talked about was that families come in all shapes and sizes. And what I particularly loved, and this is my bias, I'll admit it, is you said single family homes, including fur babies. And I thought, that's adorable because I have a giant fur baby, Maz, everyone knows. But tell me about that idea that you have, because it sounded to me very inclusive and very forward thinking. And I just thought lovely for a counselor to put right in their platform that they see families as, as being as diverse as they are.
Agreed. I mean, that's what we see nowadays is that it's not mom, dad, and two kids anymore. It's really around, say, my husband and I, we have chosen to be just the two of us plus our dog, Johnny. But I also know that we have chosen families. And I also know that with immigrants too, there are intergenerational families. We're looking at maybe grandparents that are raising their kid, like their grandchildren. And I think that at the end of the day, being this is exactly what Hamilton looks like. And I think that we need to speak about that first and foremost and really address that that the previous narrative of two parents and two kids is not that anymore. It's a lot of different things, and it's about choosing who we want to love and who are we spending our time with.
And it reminds me a little bit, there are some old stale narratives around that council table that I'm sure you've heard as staff and maybe pained you, I don't know. But one of them is the idea of a war on a car, right? The
Yeah.
idea that, why make downtown streets safer by converting to two-way when it might slow down somebody who's like bombing down from Ancaster and wants to get to Stony Creek or something. Where are you with the conversion of Main and King, or just the idea of street safety, given all the pedestrian and cycling deaths that we've been seeing in Hamilton?
I am a firm believer in street safety, safe streets, traffic calming, essentially shopping in your ward, shopping in your neighborhood, ensuring that you're supporting the local small businesses. And in order to do that, you need to be able to cross the street safely. So I am a firm believer in ensuring that we have created a safe environment for our people. I also think about, on a personal note, is that transportation doesn't need to be in a car anymore. I'll tell you that my husband doesn't drive, so what we do, we take the bus whenever we can. I drive so I can pick up groceries, but I'm also thinking about my elderly parents who are in their mid to late 70s. They're not going to drive as much anymore. So they're going to want to walk and they want to be able to feel safe walking down the street. So this is also thinking about what are some of the alternative methods of transportation to get people around and get them to different places? I have a technology background, so I've been working with a lot of technology startup companies. I am so incredibly encouraged by all of the amazing ideas that are coming forward, thinking about electric shuttles and mini scooters and thinking about, well, shared bikes, so being a big one. But it's thinking about how do we also create a different mix. So imagining that LRT is fully functional, raring to go, and it's a trunk line. It's getting us from east side to west side. So let's try and solve the challenge of first mile, last mile. How do I get from my house to the LRT, but then from the LRT to my final destination? So what is that? Is that me walking to a bus? Is that me walking to the LRT? Is that me taking a SOBI to the LRT station? Or is it from the LRT, I'm going to take a scooter to my office, or I'm going to take a minibus, like an electric minibus, to get to the Dundas Fortinos, for example. So, how do I get around first mile, last mile? And then it's also thinking about that alternative mix that's going to be affordable and efficient and accessible to all of our people. That way, we're starting to reduce that congestion, but we're also reducing the number of fatalities or potential pedestrian collisions that might be happening.
You're one of our producers who likes to use all those alternative modes of transportation, just going, yeah, the first last mile piece, right? It sounds refreshing, Tammy. I was refreshed listening to Craig Casera up in Ancaster talking about soft density and what could be done in keeping with heritage. It's refreshing to listen to Cameron talk, a downtown councillor, talk about what can be done with the cranes and supporting development we've all been working and hoping for so long, but keeping it equitable. And listening to you talk about the first last mile or kilometer, and that idea of, how do we actually use technology? I feel as though as a city, a lack of expertise maybe, or a lack of curiosity, or just been in a job too long, has led to some really staid thinking, some kind of antiquated stuff. And last summer when we took a trip across Canada, we couldn't, and I did an op-ed about this, we couldn't help but notice how the city was falling behind even smaller towns and cities that had just better infrastructure or just more technology, or we just felt like, what's happening in Hamilton.
And that's something that in economic development, my role was actually interfacing with a lot of other municipalities. and I was interfacing with other levels of government. And when we talk about these things, it was always like, well, let's say, I don't know, Surrey, BC, for example. Surrey, BC is similar to Hamilton, meaning that it's very close to Vancouver. It's growing like crazy, like way faster than Hamilton. So what are some of the things that they're doing? How can we learn from that? What are some of the things that we can bring forward to our leadership team, to council, and just say, if it ain't broke, but if it is broke, let's look at how other municipalities are doing it. How are they saving that money? How are they reallocating resources? And I think that that's where my background in economic development and my network of actually connecting with all of these other municipalities is going to be particularly advantageous to how we envision our Hamilton moving forward.
Are you hopeful that when you get around the council horseshoe, if you represent council on Ward 4, that there will be maybe enough change or enough impetus at this time in our history as a city that some of these ideas, these best practices can be adopted? Like, do you think we're going to see our city kind of jump ahead? And please correct me if my assessment was wrong, if my feeling on Hoser Trek was wrong, that we were falling behind. I know the mayor took great umbrage to it. But I mean, do you think that we are a little behind and we can jump ahead and catch up when we have the right kind of leadership at a governance level?
I think that there's a lot of it comes back down to political will. So having someone at the council table that's talking about this, advocating for this. Now there are very like to be diplomatic, there are going to be timelines, resource constraints. There's also going to be challenges with say our infrastructure or just even how we do things. And those will take time to change. And that is not something that will happen overnight. However, I think that our city staff, we are our city staff are very forward thinking and they're definitely already on that sort of radar of understanding some of these things that we're going to change. And I think that we're absolutely going to see a change at council and we're absolutely going to see a change in momentum. We already have momentum when it comes to significant building permits, that investment in the city, but I think that there's room for growth and room for improvement. And I will say that coming from that city staffer life, I will say that there is a lot of interest and will to move that forward. And I think that that's where it's exciting to be a part of this change.
And diplomacy is a good thing. It's better than fighting if it gets the job done.
Agreed.
Diplomatic
Agreed.
solutions. So when it comes to you and some of the other issues that have been contentious around the council table, the sewer gate cover up, you already said that you would, transparency and honesty is one of your sort of core values. What's happening with the Red Hill and all of that, all of the costs and all that kind of scandalous stuff that's gone on. What about some of the other issues around the table, like dealing with issues around social justice and issues around our marginalized communities and our racialized communities and sort of the tone that I think is set at the top,
Mhm.
dealing with the hate crisis in our city? Where do you come out from that? Because I didn't see a lot of that in your website so far, but I might have missed it, Tammy. So where's your head at with that?
As a racialized person, I absolutely see it, feel it, hear it. I am also the clients that I had served were very open and transparent with me about some of the barriers that they have. So it is ingrained in my core. So I'm not really sure how I would have said it other than big bold letters on my website, but it is so incredibly integral to myself and it's how I want to portray that and also bring those challenges forward and ensure that we have those open, honest conversations around the horseshoe. When it comes to these sort of social justice, it's also things like these are big, heady issues and they're complicated. And they also have 80 billion moving pieces that are happening. So it would be irresponsible for me to say this is the one way and this is the only way that we're going to do things. Like it's something that as I think about being a council member, I serve the community. I serve the community at large, and it's not my way or the highway. It has to be what is the community's thought on this? How do we collectively move this forward? How do we also find the right pieces? Because sometimes we don't have enough money, or we don't have enough people, or we don't have enough expertise. So how do we move things forward if we don't have the right amount of inputs to actually facilitate that? And when I think about this, I'm also of the opinion that we have to make tough decisions today, which may not gain me any favor, but if it is what is needed for future generations, these are the kinds of core values and tenets that I need, that I want to live by, and ensure that as we're building for the future. It's not about me getting reelected. It's about making sure that what we do today is right, and that what we're doing today is actually moving the needle forward for the future.
Is there a website that people can go to get more information on your candidacy for Ward 4?
Yes, please check out www.tammyhwang, TAMMYHWANG.ca for more information.
Wonderful. Well, Tammy, thank you so much for taking the jump into public service and having the courage to run. I say that to all of our guests who actually put themselves into serving the public full time. It cannot be easy to do in a campaign, but certainly you're coming out of the gate with a lot of optimism. So I wish you all the best, and thank you so much for being here on the Show. And if you're watching this and enjoying the Show, as Tammy says she does, please subscribe on YouTube, and then that way we can keep getting this community content to you so you're informed. But Tammy, if you'll indulge me, I just want to do one last thing. I've been signing off every Show with for months, it feels like, and that is please, please, please vote. You know, for all of these conversations, it's all fascinating and interesting and optimistic, and there's a change election coming, but only if we vote. If we sit it out like we did for the provincial elections, so many people did, we might not get the kind of change we're looking for in Hamilton. So October 24th, bring your friends, bring your family, get them informed, watch these videos about the candidates, and let's get to the polls. So please, please vote. I also think it's our civic responsibility. So, on Canada Day, I'm reminding you, get out there and vote. Thank you so much, Tammy Hwang, for being on the Show.
Thank you, Laura. Thank you so much.